This is Join Us in France, episode 16. Hello, I'm Annie, and today I'm happy to introduce David Sargent, my husband, who is sitting in for Elise.
Hello.
Well, unless this is your first time listening to the show, and in that case, welcome to you. You're probably wondering, why is her husband on today? It's pretty simple, and don't worry, Elise is just fine. This switch is all about the topic we're discussing today, driving in France. David has a lot to say about that. He's had to get used to driving in France pretty recently, and he even had to take the French driver's license. So his perspective is different from mine or Elise's, because Elise has been driving in France so long, she probably doesn't even remember what it's like to drive in America. I don't know if she ever drives in America, as a matter of fact. Anyway, so I learned to drive in France myself. I even taught driving in France for a while. Technically, I'm still, legal to teach driving, although I haven't done it in decades and I'm not going to. I don't remember very much about it. And David, he's a bit of a stickler for rules. He likes to notice rules. He likes to, he sees all the crazy things that French people do. And I have to admit, we do a fair amount of that. So I'll let him tell you all about that. But today, for the short order of business, I want to encourage you again to share the episodes of the show on your favorite social network or via email, whatever works for you. We provide share buttons at the bottom of each post on the website. So like, for instance, if you wanted to share today's post, you would go to joinusinfrance.com/16, and then you'll find all the share buttons at the bottom of that page. We've got Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, Reddit, Twitter, StumbleUpon, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Pocket. I don't even know what Pocket is, but I'm sure lots of people do. So that is why it's there. And if you don't use any social network, you're not off the hook either. We want you to use the email link so that you can email your friends and tell them about the show. That's really the only way we have to grow and keep going. So, welcome, David, and shall we talk about driving in France?
Sure.
Okay, let's go do it.
So the first thing I thought I would do is reassure you that although Annie rightfully says that I love a lot of rules, I'm not really going to talk much about rules. I'm mostly just going to talk about things that I think will surprise non-French drivers. My experience, obviously, is comparing U.S. driving with French driving, and so for people in other countries, the differences might not quite be the same, but hopefully these tips will still be helpful to you. And I thought I'd start by talking about a few misconceptions that I had and that friends and acquaintances of mine have asked me some kind of funny questions about driving in France. A lot of people imagine that driving in France is very chaotic, like, say, in southern Italy or something like that. And the truth is it's not. I mean, it's more chaotic than in the U.S., and it's a little worse because the streets are a lot smaller and the cars are a lot smaller. And so sometimes it seems a little crazy at first, but it's really not bad. The drivers are pretty reasonable, really looking around a lot. The roads are amazing. They're in great repair unless you're way out in the country. And so it's really not something that can't be done.
Right.
I mean,
and even
you're not taking your life in your own hands.
Yeah, and even northern Italy, at least, that's where I drove last. It wasn't that bad. So even
Right.
Italy's getting better, I think.
So another funny misconception that I've heard a lot, I didn't ever have this one myself, but I've heard it a lot, is people ask me if the French drive on the left, like in the UK. And the answer to that is absolutely no.
No.
In all of Europe, it's pretty much just in the UK and Ireland that people drive on the left.
Yeah.
So that's no problem to get used to. People often wonder if the French, being famous supposedly for being rude, as has been described in a previous podcast, so does that mean that they're rude and aggressive drivers? I don't think they're particularly aggressive. They're not completely laid back, and they will honk at you if they are surprised by something you do, but it's they're not going to get out and beat you up and point a gun at you or anything like that. So,
no guns, no guns.
And they do seem a bit undisciplined at times, but they kind of know what they can get away with. And especially, I think, when it comes to parking and things, that you need to be careful to not necessarily always follow the local example, because they might know what they can get away with, which may not be with what you can get away with.
That's true.
And a cop who knows that somebody recognizes a car as being from the neighborhood may give it a little slack that they wouldn't give to a rental car, or something like that.
Are rental cars easily identifiable in France? We haven't rented.
Well, I don't know, but it wouldn't be. Right. It wouldn't be a recognized car from the block. It wouldn't. Be,
True.
So, that's Marcel's car over there. So I'm gonna let it slide. Anyway, I would say to not necessarily follow all the bad examples that you see, but it's really not too bad.
Yeah.
And the roads really are very good. They do get, especially as you get farther and farther out of town, they do get pretty narrow, pretty windy.
Yeah.
But really they are in quite good repair. Another thing a lot of people wonder about is, being wine country, does that mean there's a lot of drinking and driving? And there is some. But it's something that they're working very, very hard to control, and the rules have become extremely strict, and the fines very high, and we'll talk about that later. So no, don't plan on if you want to go on some wine tasting tour, don't drive yourself there.
No, that's a very good point.
So a few things that you might want to consider when you're deciding if you want to rent a car for your visit in France. One thing that's frustrating for a lot of American drivers especially is that most cars, even rentals, are manual transmissions.
Correct.
So if you're not used to driving a stick shift, your first trip to France might not be the time to learn.
Yeah, French people have this idea that automatic transmissions are for handicapped people. Now, it's totally unfair and incorrect, but that's who, if you go into a car dealership, they will not offer. They won't suggest an automatic transmission unless they can tell that you need it.
They probably don't even have one on the lot.
Probably not. And so rental car agencies probably are better about that, but you will pay more because it's going to be a bigger car, and you will need to book it in advance and make sure
Right, there will be a lot fewer
options,
possibilities.
Yeah.
So anyway, and the cars do tend to be smaller, which is important because don't just come and rent a Hummer, because then you'll never be able to park it anywhere and have a hard time on the small streets.
Yeah, I don't even know if you could rent a Hummer, but maybe you could.
Probably not. But so, embrace the smaller car size because it will actually work to your advantage later. It's a lot easier, especially in cities. Also, make sure that you're good at parallel parking. Most places in France, there are parking lots, especially in large supermarkets and such, but parking in residential areas is often, and even in a lot of commercial areas, if it's smaller stores instead of a great big store, there's a lot of parallel parking and a lot of kind of tight parallel parking.
And you have to be able to parallel park both on the right side of the road and the left side of the road, which I would bet most Americans have never tried.
True, because there are a lot of one-way roads, and so sometimes the parking is on the left.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
but that's not very hard. Parking on the left, if you can parallel park on the right, then I think with a few tries you can get it on the left pretty easily, because that's the side you're on. It's a lot easier.
Anyway, in big cities, the bottom line is if you intend on driving constantly, then you'll be fine in a car. But if you ever want to stop driving and leave the car somewhere,
that's more complicated.
That's more complicated, and consider that before renting a car.
Right. Gas is quite a bit more expensive in France. It can be 2 to 3 times as much as in the U.S., although the cars tend to be more efficient. So it's not quite as bad as it sounds, but it's very expensive. And then in addition, if you're just going to be going around town, fine, but if you're going to be traveling distances and taking freeways, most freeways have fairly significant tolls.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is the freeways are fantastic. This money is being spent to keep them up really well. Mm-hmm. But
they do cost a lot of money.
They do cost a fair amount of money, and what I suggest is there's a website called Via Michelin
Oh, yeah.
VIAMICHELIN.com. And it's very much like, Google Maps or Mappy or whatever. And it is aware of both gas and toll prices. And so you can put in information about the type of car you're going to be driving and your distances, and it will actually tell you in euros a good estimate about how much you'll spend on gas and tolls. So
And it's pretty close.
Surprise.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. And Michelin, I think that's a French company.
Yeah.
But and so they have more information about tiny roads and... I mean, their maps, I don't like their maps as well, but they do have more local information.
Right. And if you go to viamichelin.com instead of .fr, it's all in English.
Good point.
So if you do decide to rent, arrange that rental before you come. You'll save a lot of money if you make the arrangement in your home country. Mm-hmm. It's also a good idea to get an international driving permit. Most countries have some way to do a transcription so that it'll be written in several languages and internationally recognized. In the U.S., you can go to the National Automobile Club or the American Automobile Association, and it's like $15 and a pretty quick process. It's not absolutely required in all cases.
No.
You can check with the rental agency if they require it, but it's not a bad idea to have one, especially if it's not hard to get. Mm-hmm. However, even if you have a driver's license and an international permit, if you're not 18, then you can't drive in France because they can't get a license until 18. So just because you're American and 16 and got one, it's not good enough. And in fact, a lot of rental agencies won't rent to you until you're 21 or even 25 in some cases. So if you're young, check.
Yeah.
Some won't rent if you're under 25. Some will between 21 and 25, but they add surcharges. So check on that. And as a general recommendation, we feel like we should discourage people from driving in the big cities, especially Paris. It's just going to be a lot of grief and a lot of expense. And the public transportation is so good that, fighting for finding parking and some of the struggles with some of the really dense traffic, we just don't feel like is worth it.
Yeah, traffic jams are really bad in and around Paris. Also, in the southeast, if you go to the Riviera, especially in the summer, I mean, it can be an hour to go across a place that should take 10 minutes just because of the traffic. So if you must have a car, then I guess that's one thing. But if it's just that it's more comfortable for you, that you don't really want to spend the time to figure out the public transportation, really, you're going to save yourself a lot of grief if in a big city if you don't have a car.
And if you are going to have a car, if you're going to be doing some traveling across the country, a car can be a great way to go. Mm-hmm. But if you are going to have some stops in big cities, make sure that your hotels there provide parking. It'll probably be an extra charge, but that will simplify your life tremendously and will almost certainly be a lot less expensive than trying to find parking on your own.
Yeah. Very good point.
Okay, so just before I dig in, a few terms that I thought were worth knowing. For signs, we certainly don't think you need to speak French to be able to drive in France. But a lot of cars are diesel, which doesn't seem like it would be a big deal, except that the word for diesel, gasoline, doesn't look anything like diesel. Yeah. It's occasionally marked like diesel, but usually it's marked gazole, G-A-S-O-L-E, or gasoil, G-A-S-O-I-L. We'll put some of these terms on the website, in the show notes.
Yeah.
And then other gas, of course, there's no longer any leaded gas in France. There hasn't been for a long, long time. But the unleaded gas is called sans-plomb, S-A-N-S space P-L-O-M-B. And the octane here is listed as 95 or 98. And I know that in some places it would actually be 85 and 88. It's a different calculation.
Yeah.
But that's the correspondence.
Yeah.
Another common one, péage, P-E-A-G-E, is a toll. Mm-hmm. Déviation, D-E-V-I-A-T-I-O-N, is a detour. Mm-hmm. And hopefully during, travel months, travel times, there shouldn't be too much of that going on.
Oh, it's the opposite. French roads get a lot of maintenance done during the summer.
Because there isn't as much regular traffic.
Exactly. And so in the summer, you're even more likely to find deviations and blockages and whatever else they're going to come up with than the rest of the year. So that's a problem.
Okay. And then another term that you'll see a lot when you park, if you parallel park someplace in a city, even a small city, the word on the ground can be payant, P-A-Y-A-N-T, which means that you have to pay for the parking and you have to go find a meter. We'll talk about that later.
Yep.
But the main reason that I wouldn't worry about being able to read every single sign is that most of the signs are little pictures and they're reasonably intuitive. I don't have any intention of, doing a long description of a lot of signs and rules and stuff like that. But
thank goodness.
Yes. But I do strongly recommend that you get or bring a good GPS and just let it lead you around.
Yeah.
And when I say GPS, I actually mean not a smartphone, because my experience is that a smartphone can be great, for small stuff and especially for areas that you're familiar with. But quite often the smartphones don't pick up the GPS signals as reliably as an actual GPS device that does nothing but that.
Yeah.
And in the cities especially, that can be a problem. You get between a couple buildings and the GPS signals get really weak, and even a normal GPS can sometimes get a little confused, but the phones even more so. And of course, most of the phones rely on internet to get the maps.
Exactly.
And you may or may not have a good plan, or you may or may not have good reception. The problem with the phone is, well, first of all, you probably don't have a phone plan while in France. And even if you do, as soon as you get out into the boonies, guess what? Even French people get poor reception in the boonies. Right.
So
it's very possible to get a prepaid plan so that you can get some data and surf the internet and get your email and that kind of thing. But I really don't recommend it for serious touring, because you will end up in areas. The time you need it the most will be when it somehow can't find a good cell tower and find out what it needs to know about the map. So I would really get a good GPS with local maps on it that are recently updated.
Yeah, and you
Take
can rent
around.
that. Yeah, you can either update your own GPS that you bring from home, or you can rent one with a car.
Right. But I strongly encourage that, because navigation in France is very different from the U.S. I don't know about other places, but they have a concept of direction. You'll drive around France and you'll just see signs everywhere telling you that various cities are in this direction, and not necessarily even tell you how far away they are. I mean, in the U.S., sometimes, especially on a freeway, you'll see a sign that says, Denver is 30 miles away or something like that. But here at all kinds of intersections and roundabouts, there will just be little signs that say Paris is this way and Bordeaux is that way. And there's very much this idea of direction. And a lot of people drive without a map, because they'll just say, how do I get there? And they'll say, well, you follow the direction to this bigger city, and then when you get closer, you'll be following the direction to this smaller city, and then the direction to this village and stuff, and then we're right behind the bakery or the train station or whatever. And a lot of people go completely on those kinds of tips, and it works great when you're used to thinking that way. But when you're looking for a very precise address, it's harder, because that last mile is the trickiest part. A lot of addresses are not well displayed. A lot of street names are not well marked. I can see that I can go, right to go to this town or left to go to that town, but what's the name of the street I'm on, and what's the number of that building over there, so that I can figure out where the house is that I need. And a GPS just takes care of that for you.
Right. And if you're going to stay at a rural gîte or bed and breakfast or something like that, ask for an actual address. Now, they may not be able to provide you with an actual address, because there are plenty of places that just go by lieu dit, whatever.
Which is just kind of a place name.
Yeah, it's like a placeholder. And so the person who's delivering the mail every day of his life in that area knows exactly where that is, but a GPS doesn't.
Actually, nowadays, a lot of GPSs do. Yeah,
okay,
and
good.
So that helps. You can often put in this place name, and lieu dit is something that we ought to add to our list of terms on the site afterwards.
That's true. It'll be on the show notes.
Yeah. And so so that's a possibility. The other thing is I've noticed more and more rural places on their websites are actually putting GPS coordinates.
Right.
So you can...
Because they know people use GPSs.
Because they know GPSs are used.
And they know that. I mean, this wasn't the case 5 years ago. People would say, well, no, I don't have a real address. I can just tell you how to get there. And when they say that, oh, you're in trouble because it means that it's going to be like... turn right after the fifth cow kind of thing. I mean, it's going to be something weird. So, and what David was bringing up, the general directions. Like, you could be in Paris, and people will tell you, oh, to go to this town 20 kilometers away, go in the direction of Bordeaux. And you're like...
Which is hours away, and you're not going to go anywhere near Bordeaux.
Right,
But that's just the direction you start out, because there are going to be signs pointing to Bordeaux. And then once you get far enough, then there will be signs pointing to the smaller place close by.
Right, and we don't ever use north, south, east, and west. That would be... Except for the train stations in Paris, which some of them do that. So who knows?
So yes, I strongly recommend a GPS. The navigation is a very different way of thinking about things, and the GPS just solves most of those problems.
Yeah.
And unless you're in a really rural area, you'll get an address. And even in the rural areas, usually they'll at least be able to give you a street name. And in fact, a lot of times you'll find on the GPS, you go to the street name, and then you're about to put in a number, and it says, oh, I don't know the numbers on that street. It's a small street. You know?
Yeah.
My TomTom will just say anywhere, and that's my only option.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Yeah.
So, and don't worry about that, because that means it's, you're on the right street. You're gonna find it.
Mm-hmm.
So, a good investment. One thing though, so I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about all the direction signs, but and those are kind of white signs with a little arrow on one end. But the bigger signs that are like for entrances to freeways and such have an interesting color code. So I mentioned that the one, there's a white background with black lettering and the arrow for the general direction. Then there are other signs that will be green backgrounds and other signs still that will be blue backgrounds. And the difference there is important. The white ones are kind of the slowest way of getting there. They're the little
smallest
streets
road
that's local. The green is a little bit bigger. So like if you had two signs, one saying, this way's white and this way's green, the green is going to be bigger streets, fewer, avoiding the middle of downtown. And then blue is actually going to take you off to some kind of freeway. In many cases, that means toll.
But not always.
Not always, especially if it's like the ring around a city.
That's
just a big
freeway.
ring. That's generally a freeway with no tolls. But once you start taking off towards a farther away city, you're going to have to stop and pay tolls.
And this is one of those French idiosyncrasies. The white signs have to do with, the white, green, and blue signs have to do with who maintains the road. So the white signs, these are roads that are maintained by departmental governments, I guess. Very small.
So like the counties.
Yeah. And then the green ones are national roads. So they're a little bit bigger and they're maintained by some national budget. And the blue ones are maintained by a freeway company, which is sometimes the government, sometimes a private company, sometimes some of both. It depends on where you are. So it's all pretty complicated. But do remember that white is generally the smallest roads. And those usually start with a D letter. And then the green ones are medium-sized roads. They start with an N and then a number. And the freeways are either A for autoroute or E for European.
Right.
And they're blue.
But those names and numbers of roads are often not there. Sometimes they'll tell you the name. Sometimes they'll tell you the name. Sometimes they won't.
Yeah.
So don't count on names. And when your GPS tells you that you should be on this road or that you're going to turn onto that road, don't be alarmed if you don't see a sign for it, because it's not like in the U.S. where practically every intersection shows the name of both streets. There are street name signs, but not everywhere.
Yeah.
And okay, but that's enough. That's enough about navigation, I think.
Yeah.
So speed limits are trickier in France than elsewhere that I've been. They seem to have a system where they're trying to avoid having too many signs. There are a number of rules.
It's not working.
I won't bore you with the details, but there are a number of rules that seem to be to avoid needing a lot of signs. Well, even if you don't drive in France, if you just walk in France, you'll see that there are an insane number of signs. If that was their goal, it didn't work. But there are kind of a lot of implied rules in France, and so you need to know what they are, because they do matter, especially when it comes to speed. So speed on the freeways is 130 kilometers an hour, which is about 80 miles an hour, unless it's raining, and then it drops to 110, so about 68 miles an hour. If it's not a freeway, though, but it's a divided highway, it has an island between the two directions, then it's usually 110. Mm-hmm. If it's a main road outside of town without an island, then it's 90, so about 55 miles an hour. And in town, it's 50, or about 31 miles per hour. Now, so whenever you go into a town and you'll see a little white sign with a red border and the name of the town in it, whenever you go into a town, one of the things that's telling you is where you are, but one of the other things that's telling you is you now have to drive like you're in the city and not out of the city. So the speed limit just changed from 90 to 50, and there is almost never a sign that says 50 at that point.
Right.
Occasionally there is, but it's very rare. And so if you keep going 90, then suddenly you're 40 above the speed limit.
Right. And sometimes those small villages, they put their entry sign, because that's where geographically the entrance to the city is. Sometimes it's like 2 kilometers away from anything that looks like a town to you, because it's still farms and whatever. But as soon as you see this sign that states the name of the town, you're in a 50 kilometers per hour zone, so that's 31 miles per hour. And guess what? The cops really like to set speed traps in those areas, because they know they can catch a lot of speeders.
Right, because even French people fall for that. I mean, you're going along at 90, you're perfectly happy, and you're on this nice straight road, and there aren't even any houses yet. I don't know that they actually place that there because of a geographical boundary or not, but that is where they've decided that the driving rule changes.
Yeah.
And so you have various rules. You're also not supposed to honk when you're inside of a city limit like that unless it's an absolute emergency. You will get honked at. Don't worry. Yeah. French people honk, and it won't necessarily be an emergency, but don't go crazy. So exceptions are marked. Sometimes you can go faster, like on one of these, if you're coming into a city limit, but it is a long road without a lot of houses, then sometimes they'll put up a sign that says you can go 70, for example.
Yeah.
The funny thing that they do at the end, or there can be slower times, and there are going to be, school crossings and stuff, and so they'll drop you down to 30. The funny thing that they do is at the end of these areas, at the end of these zones where you're going a different speed, instead of putting up a sign that says you can go 50 now, they'll put up a sign with the 70 or the 30 in it, and a slash through it that says, you're not allowed to go 70 anymore. You're not allowed to go 30 anymore. And you have to know, that means I go back to 50.
Yes. Or
out in the country, maybe they've slowed you down to 70 because it's a bunch of curves. Mm-hmm. And now you can go back to 90.
Right.
So in theory, they saved themselves creating a bunch of signs about going, 50, 90, 110, and 130. But you'll see there are plenty of signs. But just know that the slash means you don't go that speed anymore. You go back to whatever the regular speed was. So again, in a city or village limits, it's 50. Outside of the city, if there's no island, it's 90. If there is an island, 110. And if you're actually on a freeway, then it's 130 unless it's raining, and then it's 110.
Yep.
And I think on the divided highways, the 110 goes down to 100. I hadn't written that down, but I think also
I don't remember.
To go down a little bit. Anyway, be careful in the rain. One of the reasons that I go into such detail about these speed limits is that there are a lot of speed traps, and and by being a tourist, you don't necessarily get out of paying the ticket if they clock you going fast, and there is very little wiggle room. If you're supposed to go 50. You'll probably get a ticket even at 52, 53, 54. There's a little wiggle room, but not much. And there's a little wiggle room in the car. Your car, if you've rented a French car, if it says you're going 50, you're probably not going quite 50.
Right.
And you're probably going 46, 47. And then they're probably not going to give you a ticket until you've gone 51, 52, 53. But it's not like, I remember where I was in the U.S., everyone knew that you could go a good 10 miles an hour over the limit, which would be 16 kilometers over the limit here,
and
be completely safe. That is not the case here. and they will, and if they get a photo of your car, they will send the bill to your rental company, who will pass it along to you.
Yeah.
And so,
by speed traps, we have in France in the last 10 years, maybe longer, I'm not sure, we've had stationary speed
kind of
radars.
photocops.
Photocops, exactly.
Yeah.
And
so automatic cameras that just take your picture when you go by too fast.
Right. And this is true of Italy, of Spain, of England, of every place I've driven in Europe. So it's hardly just French. And we also now have mobile cars that are also speed traps. So the cops have a car that's just driving, it's unidentified, unmarked, is just driving along, and it's able to take photos of speeders both in front of it and behind it. So really people are needing to slow down because we lose points here. We have a point system. And if you get caught speeding three times a year, that's it. Your license is gone. So it's revoked. So French people used to drive extremely aggressively. It's not the case so much anymore because of this point system. And as somebody who learned how to drive in France as a youngster, I remember really dangerous driving from older drivers, especially. They were just insane. They drove like this was like some speedway and, Formula One racetrack. You hardly ever see that.
And the good news is they have just drastically reduced the number of
deaths,
fatalities
from accidents.
Yeah,
the number of accidents is not really going down, but the number of fatalities are going down drastically in France as a result.
And at the same time, the number of cars are going up.
Right,
it's going up, and so it's great progress.
It's working.
It's really saving a lot of lives.
As far as I'm concerned, it's great news.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they've done in recent years in France is radars at red lights inside of the cities. Now, those are not identified at all. But what happens is, and my dear husband got caught.
Guilty.
If you go through an intersection at orange, at the orange light, and you move all the way across the intersection, it will actually take two photos. Once when it's orange or red, and then if it catches you in violation at 2 points in the intersection, you've got a ticket.
Right. Actually, I think a little bit better way to explain that is that there's a line right where the light is, right where you're supposed to stop. There's a line, there's a sensor. They call it a radar, which is funny because it has nothing to do with radar. There's actually a metal strip in the road right at the point where you're supposed to stop at the intersection, and another one about 3 meters ahead. And when the light turns red, if either one of those metal strips can sense a lot of metal above it, then it'll take a picture from behind. And so, and you have to have 2 pictures taken. You have to get caught both at the line of the intersection and 3 meters into the intersection while the light is red. So if the light is yellow, if you're going through a yellow and the very back of your car gets through to the intersection before it goes red so that you only trip up the 3 meter one, you're fine. Mm-hmm. Or if you happen to pull up a little too far and stop just a little too far and set the one off, but you stopped, then you're fine. But if they catch you when the light is red, if they catch you over both of those lines, then you have like a €90 ticket.
Yeah.
And like she said, they're not marked. They're never marked. The
No.
speed, the kind of photocops used to often be marked, the fixed ones. They're
Not
actually
anymore.
taking down a lot of those signs, and they're also putting up new ones without signs. And there's more mobile stuff. There's always been some mobile stuff. You'd see the cops with his binoculars and stuff off to the side of the road. But and now they're putting them into the cars, like you said. So they're very serious about this. And like I said, that from everything I've read, those tickets will be forwarded to your rental company, who will be happy to charge you for
Yeah.
them.
Now, there's something that happens in Europe which is a problem, and I think it'll get fixed soon, is, for instance, if I drive my French car in Spain, I know that I can get caught, that Spain and France have an agreement, and that if I get tripped by one of those speed traps in Spain, they will just forward the ticket to France. and vice versa. But there are some countries in Europe that don't have these kinds of reciprocal agreements yet. And so you may have a German driver who knows very well that he's not going to get caught by any of the speed traps, who is not slowing down at known where there's
Speed
a radar.
traps. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that can be a little bit dangerous because all the Frenchies are slowing way down because they know there's going to be a radar. And the foreigners either don't know or don't care and try to go as fast as they can. So the more and more the European regulations are handling this, but it's not perfect yet.
Right, and that's actually pretty new. Even the agreements between Spain and France are only a year or two old, right?
Yeah.
Now, with regard to speed, another thing, so a lot of Americans I know think they can go 10 miles over the speed limit without a problem. And also generally in the U.S., you can get away with some speeding if you're actively passing on the freeway. And that also is not the case here.
Right.
If you pass, it's because the person in front of you is not going the speed limit and you want to go the speed limit. And there are plenty of people on the freeway who do not go 130.
Yeah.
They're not comfortable at that speed or they're saving fuel or whatever. I mean, so it's not like everybody's going 130 plus. A lot of people are going more like 110.
Yeah.
And so if you want to pass them, fine. That's absolutely, you're right. But you can't go 140 to pass.
Right.
And the fact that you were passing is not an appeal for a speeding ticket at all.
Correct.
Also, I mentioned that the speed limits can go down in the rain, and the newer radars apparently have a sensor. So if the ground is wet, they will start taking pictures at 110 instead of 130.
Yes, and the newer radars also have sensors for bigger vehicles. So it's the same in the U.S. A big semi-trailer is not, I suppose. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
They're not supposed to go the same speed as, regular cars.
That's right.
And those speed radars now, they know the difference between a massive truck and a car. And so if you have a massive truck going 80 where you think you could be going 90, that's why, because they know there's a speed trap and they're going to get caught at if they go 90 like a car, they're going to get caught.
Right. Yes, they have different speed limits. That's another reason you might want to pass. And those vehicles will actually have little stickers on the back of them that kind of look like the speed limit signs that show what speeds they can go, and it'll be like the regular speed and the rain speed. And so you'll know they're not just having a hard time going the speed limit. They're not allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when you're in the city, they're pretty aggressive about. You'd think that all they care about is the really fast stuff on the freeway, but no, they're actually pretty intense about maintaining the 50 kilometer an hour limit inside the city because most traffic fatalities are pedestrians.
Yeah.
And
bicycles.
So and for a long time in France, a long time, the speed limit in cities was 60, not 50, and they lowered it precisely because they realized that up to 50. Pedestrians do a lot better than up to 60. So, and so what they'll do is not only might there be radars in town, but there will be all kinds of little obstacles to make your life difficult so that you can't go too fast. And there will be lots of speed bumps, and there will be lots of chicanes where they kind of put an artificial curve in the road so that you just have to slow down.
And some of these speed bumps are wicked and will just send you flying.
Yes.
So just slow down.
Especially because, in the west of the U.S., where I was anyway, speed bumps were usually just bumps in the blacktop. They were just asphalt.
Yeah, just a tiny, gentle little pop-up.
Right, but here they'll often be like these brick things that go up quite a bit and at angles.
It's like hitting brick wall.
Don't do
it fast.
Don't do it fast.
And if you're towing anything, for the love of Pete, slow down. We get a lot of European travelers who are towing whatever, and they don't necessarily know to slow down. It's a problem.
So don't plan on being a speed demon in France. There will be people speeding. I'm not saying nobody in France speeds. You will get passed by people who are clearly breaking the speed limits.
Probably Germans.
And even French people. French people who are pretty sure that there's not a speed trap there. But you won't know.
Yeah, right.
And so be careful. Okay, there are a few unexpected rules and customs that I consider kind of gotchas for, at least for Americans. For everyone else, I don't know. But the biggie for non-Europeans, I think, is called right-hand priority. And it's a strange rule again. I think this might go back to a time when they were just trying to, just have some simple rules, not need a lot of signs, or maybe even a custom from before they had signs, where if you're driving down the road and another road comes up to your right, if they don't have a stop sign or a yield sign, you have to yield to them. And so it's a strange rule because it's a lack of a sign. There's usually not a sign to warn you that you're supposed to give priority to them. Because if you come up to a normal intersection, you might have a yield sign or a stop sign. But if you're just going along and you're on the bigger road, usually, and a smaller road is coming up to your right, you're supposed to let them on. Now, French people miss this sometimes too, right?
Yeah,
this is a really easy, it's just kind of a confusing thing. And so anybody coming from the right should know to watch. Because there's no guarantee that even a local is always going to remember to stop. In fact,
correct.
As we try to pull out from our house to get onto the main road, in theory, it's a right-hand priority, and people forget it all the time. Although part of the problem is it's a little bit blind when people are parked along there. Sometimes people don't even see that there's a road. But so it's not an absolute, don't lose a lot of sleep about this, because people are going to come up and see that you didn't slow down and maybe honk at you illegally. But then, and it's probably not the end of the world. People shouldn't jump out in front of you in a dangerous manner because they should know better. But if you see somebody coming out at the right and you think, what in the world, is this person crazy? No, he's not crazy. He's actually in the right.
Yeah.
And you should slow down for him. Now, I found that it was very tricky to figure out if somebody had a stop or a yield sign at first, because, as you'll see, there are lots of signs. And so I could tell he had a sign, but because it was turned towards him, not towards me, I couldn't always tell if it was a stop or a yield. There's another clue that's really easy, and that is when you come up to a stop sign in France, there's a solid line, a solid white line painted on the road. And if it's a yield sign, then it's a dotted line. And so as you're going along, you can very quickly see if there's a solid or dotted line. And in that case, you just absolutely keep going.
Right.
Right. If there's not a solid or dotted line and there's somebody coming up, then you really should let that person go. Now, like I said, if you forget and if somebody honks at you and whatever, it is not the end of the world. But don't have a heart attack because all these people seem to be jumping out in front of you randomly. It's not randomly. It's just different.
Yeah, and nowadays they've put more and more yield signs, but there are places where they don't want to put a yield sign because it slows people down. That's the reality of it, is when there's a right-hand side priority, you have, and you're a local, you have to slow down to make sure you have you have enough time to look. And that's why they don't want to put a yield sign there.
Well, and in addition, if the road is too big, if the one road is too big and the right-hand road is too small, then if there isn't something like a light or a roundabout or something for the big road, then the people coming out on the small road can have a very hard time turning.
Yeah.
And so it's also kind of a cheap alternative to a light or a roundabout for a small street that doesn't really need something that big, but that otherwise would never get out of their
now, where it does get complicated is that there are a few places in France where, I'm sure you're going to talk about roundabouts at some point.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just mention this briefly. But there are still roundabouts in France that work on the right-hand side priority rules. And those are extremely confusing to foreigners. Especially, notably, in Paris, le rond-point de l'Étoile, what's it called? L'Étoile? L'Étoile, yeah. It's around the Arc de Triomphe. So if you decided, I'm going to rent a car and I want to drive the Champs-Élysées and around the Arc de Triomphe, well, guess what? That's a right-hand side priority roundabout. And probably most foreigners have no idea what's going on. So that'll spook you a little bit. And actually, I've known foreigners who take that roundabout just for the rush of it, because it really is a rush. You have 10 lanes of traffic merging and all trying to yield to the right, and it's very strange.
Right, and so what this means, if you're not used to roundabouts and having a hard time picturing this, you've got like 6 lanes of in the circle itself or more, and several entrances coming in, and the people inside the circle have to yield to the people coming into the circle. Right. Instead of the people coming into the circle waiting until there's a space for them, the people coming in just go, and the people who are already inside are supposed to yield to them by this right-hand priority rule.
Right, but then as soon as you're in the circle, you're yourself are supposed to yield to people coming from
everyone else.
So it's really bizarre. I'm sure you can find videos on YouTube of how this works. So, but it's just one more reason to not drive in Paris, and those are getting pretty rare all over France. But there's still places where you see them, where the mayor didn't want to pay for the renovation of the roundabout, and that roundabout's been there for 100 years, and live with it.
Right. And again, don't lose a lot of sleep over it. And even if you make a mistake, even French people make mistakes on these things sometimes because it is a little confusing at times.
Yeah.
But so it's not a big deal. But just so that you know why things are happening, and that you don't think that people are just being completely nuts, because in many cases they're just kind of insisting on their right. Mm-hmm. So. Another thing to watch out for, a real gotcha to watch out for, is that once you're outside of cities, an awful lot of roads have ditches on one, if not both sides of them. Mm-hmm. To take away water, so that the rainfall doesn't lead to hydroplaning, that kind of thing. And a lot of those ditches are not covered, but they can get quite overrun with grass.
Right. And actually, I was driving around the countryside last Saturday, and I took some pictures. From a distance, it looks like it's just green grass. But if you pull over, there's a freaking hole there. It's the ditch. Yep. And I've known people who've tried to pull off on the side of the road in a rural area and fell into, the car
went into the ditch.
The ditch. Now, they usually don't hurt themselves because they're going at slow speeds at that point or whatever, but it's really embarrassing, and you might damage your car pretty badly if you fall into a ditch. I even know an American that it happened to, and he had been driving in France for a long time.
I know a French guy who did it.
Yeah, it happens.
In his case, part of the problem was it was in the mountains in the winter, and so it was actually the snow. Not the grass. But you need to be very careful pulling off of a small country road, because unless you can really see what's going on or see that there's some gravel or something like that, because it could very well be a ditch.
Yeah.
Another thing that's a little weird, and this changes some from area to area anyway, so depending on where you're from, it might not be so strange, but most of the places I drove would put, if I was coming up to an intersection, the light would often be suspended in the middle of the intersection or kind of on the other end of the intersection so that I could see it well in advance. Well, France has such bizarre little roads and strangely shaped intersections with roads coming together at all kinds of different angles that they don't do that. They actually put the light on a pole on the sidewalk to the right of where you are. So, right. And in fact, it's so close that there's usually a second light lower on the pole, so that the first person who stops there, you can't see the light overhead because of the roof of your car. And so you see one at about your eye level off to the right. And then everybody behind you is looking at the bigger one up above. But it's not clear out across the intersection or in the middle of the intersection suspended. It's on a pole to the right. And sometimes on a big intersection, there will be a second one to the left so that the people coming on the other side can see it on the left as well. But
the one that matters,
the one that really matters is that one on the right. And that takes a little getting used to, because sometimes you'll see a light a little ways away and think that's the one that matters to you. And there's another one closer that you actually have to stop for. So there might be a green light ahead. But there's a red light before that, and so you have to stop for that red light and then wait and go through the next
This
light.
often happens when they want to give the right-of-way to buses, so they will create a bus lane, and they will stop you just shy of where you think the intersection is, so that the bus can always get through the green light. And if you're not paying attention to the light to your immediate right, you might go through that. But it's not that common, but it does happen.
Another thing to keep in mind is that when a French person puts his blinker on, that means I'm going. I know a lot of times in the U.S. it's more of a, you're indicating your desire, not your intention. It's like, I'd like to move left, so if you could consider leaving me a spot to go in, that'd be really nice. No, when a French person puts on his blinker, that usually means I'm going.
Yeah.
So be aware of that, that it's not just, hey, if you don't mind, it's I'm going now. And also, if you can remember yourself, that if you put on your blinker too early, you might surprise people a little bit.
Yep.
More and more in a lot of places in the U.S., I know that you're not allowed to use your cell phone while you're driving, and that's absolutely the case here. In fact, of all the things that we talk about as far as tickets and stuff, the thing I actually know the most people getting tickets for is cell phones.
Including you.
Including me. I've had one, yes. And if they see a cell phone in your hand,
I actually had a cop stop me and ask me, "Were you on the phone?" And I wasn't. I was scratching my face. I had my hand to my face because I was scratching my face. And I showed him, look, my phone is on the other side, it's on the passenger seat and it's turned off. I was not talking on the phone. And so I got out of that one. But they do jump out right in front of you, like, to catch you on the phone. They're crazy. They're crazy.
Yep. Another big difference from what I was used to is that a lot of places I drove, you were allowed to make a right-hand turn at a red light. You had to come to a full stop, look, make sure nobody was coming, but then you could go.
Nope,
and here that is
here.
not the case unless there's an extra light next to the red light. If there's a little arrow light that's on or blinking, then it works the same. Go up, stop, make sure nobody's coming, go. But if that arrow is not there, you can't turn right just because nobody's coming.
No right on red.
Another thing that can be a little confusing is if you come to one of these red lights on the pole, so you've got the big light up high, the little light lower, and somewhere in the middle there might be what looks like a little yield sign, a mini yield sign. It's not as big as the usual ones, just a simple triangle, upside down triangle thing. And you might think, what in the world? Or there might be another thing that's kind of a yellow diamond. And
I know what it's for.
Tell us.
It's just in case the light doesn't work.
Right.
If the light is out, then it turns into a yield or a stop, depending on what they put on the pole.
Right. And so as long as the light's working, you ignore those little signs. But if the light weren't working, then the yield sign would mean you have to yield to the other direction, or a stop sign would mean you have to, stop and yield.
Right. But honestly,
and there's a little yellow diamond, which kind of means actually you get the priority. But it's very rare that the lights don't work. So generally, ignore those little signs.
And if the light is out, just slow it down and do whatever else is, what everybody else is doing, do that. And that's probably safe.
Right. A lot of people ride bikes on the public roads in France, and they have every right to do so. And if you're in a city, you need to make sure that when you pass them, you leave them a meter or a yard, so that they've got plenty of time plenty of place to wobble if they need to.
1 meter is a lot. It's bigger than a yard. So yeah,
a little bit, yeah. And so pretty much, if they reached their arm out towards you, they couldn't touch your car from their bike. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the countryside, you're supposed to leave 1.5 meters. You're really practically supposed to go out into the other lane. And
if you drive in the countryside in the summer in France, you will see gobs of cyclists.
Yep.
Lots and lots of them. So beware that.
And be careful of cyclists. Not so much in the country; they're usually pretty easy. But in the city, people on regular bikes who are just running errands or going to work or school or something like that on a normal bike, not the people in, sports get-up and helmets and such going long distances.
Yeah.
But the kind of commuter bikers and the pedestrians, watch out, because they are crazy. I was saying that the French drivers aren't so bad, but pedestrians and cyclists...
they'll jump right in front of you.
Yeah, you need to be really careful in cities because people will try to dodge across the street where there's not a crosswalk or on a red light or all kinds of things, and they know. I mean, they don't want to get hit. Obviously, they're keeping an eye out for things, but in the back of their mind, they know if anything happens, it's the driver's fault.
And it is in France. It is.
It really is.
Pedestrian theoretically could cross anywhere they want and not get, not lose a court case. They might lose their life, which, you'd think it would slow them down, but some
You'd
people...
hope, but it doesn't seem to.
Yeah, some people it doesn't. Some people it doesn't. So...
And this is another reason why I say don't drive in Paris, because it's not just the other cars or the parking or the everything else. It's also dodging all the pedestrians and cyclists. And everything.
Surprisingly, it's often the older people who are just insane. They will... they're so used to crossing streets anywhere. The jaywalking, to them, it's a second nature. And so they don't realize that with age, they've slowed down. They used to jot across that street. They've done it all their life, and they still to do it at 80.
Yep.
And it's not.
And there is
working.
a certain logic to it. It's like they've lived this long. Why not? Another thing to watch out for is in the U.S., if we have two different colors of lines for the lanes in the road, white lines and yellow lines. And so the yellow line down the middle shows that the traffic is going to go on different directions on the other side of the lines. And that's just not how it works here. If you ever see a yellow line here, it's all the lines are probably yellow, and it's because they're doing construction. Yeah. And so it's a temporary marking for, a lane change as you avoid construction. So you need to watch very carefully for one-way signs, the kind of red circle with the white bar in it that says don't turn here because you'd be going down a one-way street the wrong way, or for the signs that say, no left turn here, when you got the little left-hand arrow with a bar through it. You need to be very careful of those things, and you need to trust those things and not the direction that cars are parked on that street, because locals will often park backwards. And so just because you look down the street and see a couple cars going that way.
If there's a perfectly good parking space there, you park there, right?
Parking is rare in a lot of places, and so people do what they can. But again, this is the locals knowing what they can get away with. Mm-hmm. And so don't trust the way a car is parked on the side of the street to say, oh, clearly I can drive that way. No. Look for the signs.
Yep.
And speaking of lanes, when you are on the freeway, if you're not passing, stay in the right-hand lane. And the French are really quite good about this. This is a pretty big deal in French law. And you don't pass on the right. If you want to pass, get into the middle or the inside lane and pass, and then get back over to the right. Yeah.
If you don't, they will not be happy with you.
Yep.
They will ride your tail, and they will be very unpleasant. This is where you're going to get honked at or brights flashed at you.
And it's not even illegal out on the freeway.
That's right. And they will be right. Do not just troll the fast lane because you feel like it.
Speaking of lanes, on the freeway, when lanes merge together, they're well indicated with big signs with arrows coming together. It's very intuitive, very easy, and they give lots of warning, no problem. In the cities, unfortunately, there is no such sign. Sometimes you can tell by arrows on the ground, but when you're driving in traffic, a lot of times the cars in front of you are hiding those from you.
So look ahead.
And so if you look ahead and think, looks like on the other side of that intersection the road's not as wide as it is over here, then just go through slowly, look around, and it'll work out, and everybody else is doing the same. Yeah. But
it can surprise you.
But it can surprise you.
I know you've been surprised a few times, yeah.
I have. Another thing that can be surprising in the city in the same vein is near an intersection there will be arrows painted on the ground to show like this lane is for a right-hand turn, this lane is to go straight through, this lane is to go left, and or sometimes kind of a two-headed arrow that this could be, right or straight, that kind of thing. And oftentimes you don't see those until it's pretty late, and sometimes you'll find yourself stuck in a turn lane when you wish to go straight. Try not to panic. It happens to everybody. Just, go around the block, or pretty soon there will be a roundabout and you can do a U-turn really easily.
Yeah, or you could try and merge into the traffic.
If there's not too much traffic, you can try. And certainly, again, this is the kind of thing that it's not even just because you're a foreigner. It's confusing. It's not terribly well marked. For their 1,000,001 signs, I'm surprised that they don't have a little bit better for warning about this.
He's going to petition the government for new signs.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you, whoever has the contract for making signs is just rolling in the dough. And it is surprising to me that, for all the nonsense signs that they have, that they don't sue something as important as this. But so this can be surprising. Obviously, people who live in the area get used to those patterns, but even French people who aren't from an area can get surprised by that. So don't be too hard on yourself if you get confused by such things, because they can be a bit on the confusing side. I talked about cell phones being strictly enforced. Another thing that's very strictly enforced here is seatbelts. Everyone has to wear a seatbelt. I know some places I've lived, if you're an adult or you're in the back seat or there are some exceptions. There are no exceptions here.
Helmets, if you rent a motorcycle or...
Are also absolutely required.
Yeah, required.
Yep.
No exception.
And so
Not
everybody...
on bicycles, though. Not on bicycles.
Bicycles don't require a helmet, although
Might
it's
be a good
not a bad
idea.
idea. But motorcycles do, no matter how old you are, no matter how small the motorcycle or scooter is, they're required. And everyone has to be in a seat belt, if not a booster or a baby seat.
Yep. Them's the rules.
Fuzzbusters, radar detectors, €2,000 fine. They're
Don't do it.
absolutely illegal. Don't get caught with one.
Yeah.
Drinking and driving, I mentioned earlier, a few statistics. If you hit 0.05 blood alcohol level, it's a €750 fine. And if you hit 0.08 or refuse to take the test, it's a €4,500 fine and
Now-
possible jail time.
now-
It's like I said earlier, it's strict.
It's very strict.
That is 0.05 is just a couple drinks.
Yeah, if that. And if you're a skinny woman, it's
It's one.
one. It's
Yep.
one. If you're a burly guy, yeah, you'll get away with maybe a couple of drinks. But really, and it's strictly enforced, and they will stop people. The cops go out in force and stop everybody on the freeway. Everybody gets off the freeway and blows in the machine.
Yeah, and actually nowadays they've got a new gadget that's kind of cool. That for a long time, there was this kind of tube that you would
He
have to
got to
blow
try
into.
it. I didn't
yeah, I
try
got to
it.
try this. I got to try this recently. There's a new thing. There's no tube at all. The box just has kind of a little circle on the end that looks like an integrated microphone, and they say count to 5, and you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and enough of your breath goes into it that it detects from that, so they don't have to keep changing out the little straws kind of things.
But they will set traps. Sometimes it's late at night. Sometimes it's not. On very busy freeways, if you see like a huge traffic jam where you're like, what is it? Is this an accident or something? It could be an accident, but it could also be...
It's actually more likely to be. We've definitely seen
An
more
alcohol
of those.
trap.
We've definitely seen more of those for alcohol traps than for actual accidents.
Yeah, and honestly, you can't get away with not blowing. Everybody has to blow, and they don't even check your documents or anything. All they want to do is they want all the drivers to be checked for alcohol. And so, because the rules are so strict, people are getting to the point where they have designated drivers and they know to be careful, because they will impound your car. They will take your license right there and then. You will have to call somebody to come get you. If you're above a certain limit, which I think is the 05, is where they just car impounded, go home.
No, 08, yeah.
08?
Yeah.
Okay. But 0.08 is what? Maybe 3 drinks? It's not like you're not raving
Depending
drunk.
on the person, yeah. When I was living in Utah, of all places, which is very conservative about this kind of thing, for a long time, 08 was when you first had a concern.
Right.
And now that's the really bad infraction here.
Yeah.
So I thought I don't know what Utah does anymore. It's been ages since I've been there. So, but yeah, this is tight, and I personally know people who've gotten in trouble for this.
Oh yeah.
I know a guy right now who doesn't have his license for 6 months because he was a little over that 08 limit. And they took away his car and they took away his license, and his wife had to come pick him up, and they don't mess around.
Yeah.
So even though it's famous for wine country,
Well, we had a problem. For many years,
Yeah.
we had a problem, especially in the countryside. People, older French people are used to drinking at every meal. Like, they will have 2-3 drinks at every meal. They're functioning alcoholics, but they're alcoholics, really. There's no way around it. And so it was a problem, and so now they catch them.
Yep. Okay, now we've talked a lot about tickets and about police people. A few other thoughts on the police in France. Have your driver's license with you, and if you've got the international permit with you. But in France, driver's license isn't actually ID. It's just permission to drive. And so make sure that you have actual ID with you as well. For most of us, a passport.
Yeah.
And the cops, Annie alluded to this earlier, but I don't think she really went into detail. She mentioned, things about the cops hiding or kind of standing out in front of you. That's another thing that's a little startling here is they're not all in their car behind you flashing their lights. Actually, a lot of them will be right in front of you. Yeah, a lot of them will be right in front of you. As you come through the toll booths, quite often there will be a cop. Well, not all that often, but we saw one
just this weekend.
This weekend, so it's fresh on the brain. There will be a cop standing right there with out in the middle of the road where these 8 lanes of people paying their tolls are trying to get back into the 2 or 3 lanes of freeway.
She was right in the middle of traffic.
Yep.
But she was waiting because she had gotten a call from a speed. Somebody was clocking people further up, probably as you approach the toll, because they want you to slow way down before the tolls. And so they sometimes have a police officer right there clocking you, and then they radio ahead the license plate of the people who were going too fast. And she's right in the middle, and she's looking, and when she sees the correct license plate, she's going to run to that car and stop them.
Yeah, she's going to blow their whistle and point at them.
Yeah.
The time Annie mentioned I got caught with a cell phone. The guy was standing on the island that had the red light on it and kind of right up against the pole. I didn't even see him there. And of course, part of that was because I was messing with my phone, Although I wasn't actually making a phone call. It was an alarm was going off to remind me of something I knew full well I was late for, and I was trying to get it to shut out. But I didn't see him, and as I pull up to the red light, he leans right in front of the window and blows his whistle and taps his finger on the window right in front of my nose, and I just about came out of my skin. And my mom, who was in the passenger seat, was pretty alarmed as well. And then he starts pointing, go over and pull over to the side over there. We're going to have a little chat. And so, yeah, he just about gave me a heart attack. And or times that I've seen in the city going down, some street and seen a cop that was standing between a couple of parallel parked cars on the side, and he was jumping out at people who had run a red or a stoplight or something like that. I mean, he's right there in traffic.
He could get hit, yes.
Yeah, but they're daring.
And so cops are fearless in France, but there are also a type of cop that French people fear more than the others, and that's the motorcycle cops. For some reason, if anybody sees a motorcycle cop, they will slow down. Maybe they mean business more. And there's gendarmerie, so they're
almost military.
Yeah, theoretically, gendarmerie, it's a classification that they're military. They live in barracks, and I mean, it's different. It's not like your city police.
Yeah, there are different kinds of police in France, and that's the big deal one.
Yeah.
So and policemen. So if you're caught by a policeman instead of a photocop, they can actually take payment. They can actually take, in many cases, not always, but in a lot of cases, they can actually take your credit card and take your payment right away. They cannot take
cash, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so. But they can take credit cards and...
Now, cops are typically not corrupt in France.
No, don't try to bribe a cop in France.
Yeah, don't try to bribe a cop out of
that will go very badly.
A fine. And if they ask you for payment, I don't know if they're allowed to ask for cash. But if they are, they will give you a receipt. I mean, it's not like...
Yes.
I don't think the guy's...
You're not being fleeced. You're not being fleeced. What's happening in that case, there are 2 things going on. In the case of a tourist, they're trying to make sure they get paid at all, right? Mm-hmm. Because they know that you could, just take off without paying it.
They'll never see you again.
Although, if you're in a rental car, like I said earlier, it will go to the rental company who will certainly pass it on to you. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that they're trying to do, and this is important to know, is they're trying to get you to admit to what you've done. Because if you pay a fine in France, if you pay a moving violation fine, then you have admitted guilt.
Yeah.
And there is no way to appeal after you've paid. So if something happened that you thought, no, I'm going to try to appeal that, don't pay it.
Right.
You have to start the appeal process first. Don't pay it, because once you pay it, you've admitted guilt, case is closed.
Yep.
So after all of this talk about policemen, I hope that we haven't scared you to death and thought, I can't possibly drive in France. There are cops everywhere.
It's not true.
It's actually not true. Compared to my experience in the U.S., I actually see cops a lot less in France than I do in the U.S. Now, of course, most of the time when I see them in the U.S., they're just driving around. But I see cops driving around reasonably often when I'm in the U.S. And here I only occasionally see one. When I saw the one at the toll the other day, I couldn't really quite remember the last time that I'd seen one. I mean,
it's not all the time.
And so, but when you see them, it's different enough that it's good to know. And as long as you're careful, there probably won't be a problem. And your biggest concern is going to be the photo cops, not the people cops. It's going to be the speeding tickets and the red lights that you just need to be really careful about, because that'll just get mailed straight to your rental agency, since they'll recognize the license plate.
Yep.
But so don't worry. I want you to know about it, but it's not that.
He's
bad.
just paranoid. It's okay.
Yeah. But it's good to know your rights, especially and because it can be a little alarming at first. So, okay. Probably the craziest thing in France, and the thing that I really hated at first, right-hand priority wasn't what got my goat at first. The thing I really hated at first was roundabouts. Interestingly enough, now I'm completely addicted to them. And when I go someplace without roundabouts, I miss them. But it's true that they take a little getting used to.
Yeah.
And so, for anybody who hasn't seen one, they're sometimes called traffic circles, or rotaries, and there will be one or more lanes going in a circle, and they are supposed to kind of replace stop and yield and four-way stop and lights and this kind of thing, and have some interesting properties where they tend to deal with traffic more naturally than those other systems, and you tend to get more cars through.
The Mythbusters tested them.
That's true, and
there's a good episode on them.
Yep. And they were quite surprised at how well it turned out.
Right, and they were testing them with Americans who didn't know what the heck they were doing, because I could tell from seeing the testers that they were brand new at this.
Yeah, French drivers would have been even more aggressive.
Yeah, French drivers would have gone way faster.
Yeah.
You don't need to slow down that much at a roundabout. Anyway.
So generally, what you have is it's like a big intersection, and if you don't know what this is, just Google for roundabouts, and you can find all kinds of
France
pictures and.
Hopefully not
even
too many horror stories.
No. But the classic situation is that you just have, 4 entrances, that you've got this kind of plus sign shaped intersection that's now got a circle in the middle of it. And as you come up to it, generally, you're going to have a little yield sign that's going to show you that you have to yield to the people in the middle. So in this case, it's you're letting the people coming from your left go instead of the other rule in the rest of the area where everything's to the right. But generally you have a little yield sign, and so you come up. If nobody's in there, you just hop right in. You don't have to stop.
And you also have a blue one-way sign ahead of you.
Yeah, there's an arrow inside that shows which direction to go around the circle.
This is just for the English.
That's true. Right, because since they drive to the left, they go clockwise instead of
exactly. They go around roundabouts in the wrong direction.
Yep.
Oh, that is awful. Poor people. I'm sorry.
Well, Annie is still scarred from trying to drive her French car in England, which is a double whammy. Because I think that if your steering wheel had been on the other side like the locals, it wouldn't have been nearly as disturbing.
Yeah, but that was really unnerving. To take the roundabout the wrong way
at night, and we were tired. Anyway, distraction. So normally, if you're going to get off right away, so you're going to essentially do a right turn, then as you approach the roundabout, you should start signaling right, and you should kind of hug to the right as you go into the circle. Just kind of stay to the right, signal to the right, work your way out. Just stop if you need to, or slow down if you need to let people get past. But once there's a spot, just go to the left, and be signaling to the right the whole time, and people behind you will know what you're doing. The people trying to come into the roundabout from other spots will see that they don't need to wait for you, because you're just going to leave the circle before they want to come in, so they can hop out right away. If you're going to go straight through, now what I'm telling you right now is not what the rules say, for as much as my wife will tease me about loving the rules. What I'm going to tell you now is what people do, because that's what matters, so that you don't surprise people. If you're going to essentially go straight through, you just want to get to the other side, don't signal at all. Kind of try to hug the inside of the, go as straight through as you can. Kind of, go to the left, and so that you're close to the circle in the middle, and just work your way right through. And there are all kinds of rules about how to signal and other things like that nobody does, and you'll just confuse people if you do it right.
Except for driving schools, which have to do it right. And so if there's a driving school on the roundabout, if there's a student driver on the roundabout, they will behave a little strangely, very strangely, as a matter of fact. But they have to.
They'll hug to the right and then signal when it's time to go out and confuse everybody, not just you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Then if you're going to turn left, what you do is when you're coming up to the entrance, start signaling left right away. And by left, I mean kind of turning left
Three-quarter
or
turns,
if you're going to go 3/4 or more, you might be doing this to do a U-turn.
Yeah.
And so what you'll do is you'll, at the entrance, start signaling left, slow down or stop if you need to let people by, and then hop in and again, hug that island in the middle to the left until you're about ready to come out and leave your signal left the whole time. And then as you're coming upon the exit that you want to get out of, whether it's that one at 3/4 of the way or all the way around or whatever, then switch your signal to the right so that the people behind you can see that you're about to cut back across.
And if you do that, you will surprise no one.
Right. That's right. You'll, as long as you're signaling left, they'll know that you're going to keep going. And once you start signaling right, and they will let you through.
This is confusing sometimes when there's very small roundabouts. For instance, near where we live, there's a place that has a roundabout where 90% of the people, maybe 99% of the people, go straight through. But it's also the entrance to a small supermarket. And so the people who want to get into the supermarket, they will do a 3/4 turn around. And they really need to be careful because everybody's so used to everybody going straight through. If they want to go left, they need to really blink left. Otherwise, they might surprise people coming into the roundabout. Right. And that's just because people are so used to going straight through that this.
Right. That signaling. I'm not saying that everybody does it perfectly.
Right. No.
But it's a good idea to do when you're not used to the area. Clearly show, both by signaling to the right and hugging the right of the circle, that you're going to go right.
Mm-hmm.
Or clearly position your car even though not signaling per se, like you're trying to go straight through.
Yeah.
And
the
clearly
of the
signal.
Car is
it matters, and I found with the whole driving school experience, and that matters. The position of the car matters more than the blinker in that case.
Yeah, because that's the signal people read.
Right. Because normally you're supposed to hug the side and then not signal beforehand, but signal as you're about to leave. And every time I did that, somebody else would jump in front of me thinking I was going to turn right.
Oh, and besides, you had a driving school thing on top.
They should have known better, but they don't. They don't pay attention to that.
Yeah.
They don't pay attention
to
that.
Actually, they do it on purpose. They jump in front of you so they're not stuck behind you.
Maybe. But anyway, I've found that that's one rule that I absolutely refuse to follow because it confuses everybody.
Yeah.
So just kind of, stay, kind of hug the center island, go as straight through as you can, and just go straight, and that'll work. And if you're going left, signal left until you're about to exit, and then signal right that shows I'm going to cut right back across and exit. Yeah. And then everybody will know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everybody else won't be quite as
diligent.
Yeah, as disciplined about it as you. But one of the great things about a roundabout is you can't go very fast in the middle of a roundabout, and everybody is at least going the same direction. So it turns out that there are a lot fewer problems in a roundabout than in a light. Where you have people turning,
or four-way stop.
and there are a lot
very
more
few accidents in roundabouts.
Right, because you just kind of have to slow down and look at what everybody's doing. Mm-hmm. You don't really have much choice, and you don't just come up on an intersection that's got a green light and you just blow through saying, clearly I have priority. I don't have to stop and wait and see if somebody was asleep at the wheel or drunk or blah, blah, blah. No, in the roundabout, you're always alert.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why things actually work out pretty well here is with all the roundabouts, chicanes, speed bumps, all these crazy things going on. The French people are really quite alert as they drive. And so, and lanes merging, this, that, and the other. They don't just kind of zone out and get on autopilot because you can't. There's too much going on. And so just...
and the streets are narrow. You have to pay attention. You're going to hit something.
Narrow and often windy and things like that. So that gives you some ideas, and you'll quickly get addicted to them because they're great for U-turns. And so if you ever make a wrong turn, just know there will probably be a roundabout pretty soon, and you can get turned around. No problem.
Yeah.
A few roundabouts that are very large will actually also integrate lights.
Yeah.
You might be coming up on a roundabout and see a red light, and so you have to wait to get into the roundabout because of the light. And sometimes it'll even stop you at different points
But
inside.
again, if it's a big enough roundabout that it has a light, there are probably lots of other people using that roundabout. So just do what.
Just follow what they do.
Yeah.
And again, and just keep an eye out though on your right hand side for those little lights in that case.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of funny, and this applies to a roundabout, and it can also apply to other strange intersections, is if you're looking, because sometimes you had a light to get into the roundabout, but inside the roundabout there aren't any, but you can see people who want to come in are stuck at a light, and on your side of the light, on the back of the light, there's a red plus lit up. And that's a signal to you that those guys on the other side of the light are looking at a red light. That's actually telling you, yeah, go ahead, because these guys are stopped at the light. And sometimes if you ever are at an intersection where you realize that people coming into that intersection at a different direction from you are looking at a light, and on your side there's a red plus, that means they're stopped. You can go. Don't. Yeah. That plus isn't for you, it's for them. Just letting you know about them. So parking. In cities, lots and lots of parallel parking and usually paying. I mentioned the word payant earlier. Mm-hmm. Depending on the city, they may take coins, they may take credit cards, although if they take credit cards, only the ones with the chips that you talked about on your other episode.
Yeah.
You need a PIN. And in some places, like in Paris, there's a card called La Paris Carte that you can get at a tobacco shop where you get like 10 or 20 euros and then you can use it in the
10 to 20
meters.
Euros will be good enough to park for 2 hours, okay? In Paris.
No, I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah. But if lines are painted in blue on the ground...
Yeah, if you have little dotted blue lines showing...
That's your hint
spots.
that you have to pay.
Yep.
And they usually have something called rodateur, but what are they called? Parking meters?
It's a meter. Usually, now in a lot of U.S. cities, I know that there are little meters at each spot, and that's never the case here. I've never seen that. So park your car, and go look around, and within a block, you're going to see a machine that you can put some money or whatever in. It will give you a ticket. Go back and put the ticket on your dashboard so that it's visible from the outside. And
in most cities, it's free to park between 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. So once, but you'll see it. If you put coins in the machine and it jumps all of a sudden to 8 a.m. the next morning or 8:15 or whatever,
right.
It just means that you've paid, like you arrived maybe at 8:30 p.m. and you put €1 in there, and that's good enough till the next morning at 8, 10, or
right,
8:15,
and the meters will know about things like if you don't pay in the evening, or if you don't pay on Sundays, or if you don't pay on holidays. And so, as you start putting your money in, it'll be showing you date and time. This is good until, and sometimes that can jump quite a bit. On a Saturday night, you might get all the way till Monday morning or something.
Right, and you have to pay attention to the dates and the time on the display if you can see it.
And then just go back and stick that in your car, in your dashboard where it's visible to the meter maids.
Yeah.
The no parking sign, I didn't talk a lot about signs, but the no parking sign is really odd and doesn't, I don't know who thought this up. It's like a blue circle with a red ring around it and a red slash through the middle, and that means no parking. But pretty much you'll have an idea. You'll see where people are parking.
I guess I could put a picture of a no parking sign on the website.
Sign. And then sometimes there's a slash going the other way too, so that there's kind of a red X over this blue circle. And that means no parking or stopping. You're not even allowed to stop and let somebody out of the car or take your groceries out. I mean, you are supposed to just move on.
Yeah, yep.
Also, speaking of parking, don't leave anything in plain sight, anything especially valuable, but even really much of anything. Unfortunately, burglaries of cars are quite common in France, and if you leave a bag or something, it wouldn't be surprising if somebody broke a window to see if it was worth taking.
Yep, it has happened to me. It's been a long time, but it's happened to me.
In case of an emergency or an accident, if you get in a little fender bender, there will be forms inside of the car called a constat amiable, which is an amicable accident report. If no one was injured, you don't actually have to get the police involved.
They won't even come.
Yeah. You can, you basically just kind of draw what happened and send it off to the insurance. Now, as a visitor, make sure to call the French person will probably just want to fill out the form and sign it and take off, and won't even call their insurance company or anything. They'll just send in the report later and let the two insurance companies fight it out. In your case, it would be a good idea to contact your rental agency and
let the rental agency
find out what
argue it out with
what
the
they
other
want
driver.
you to do, so that you don't have to do the arguing, so that you don't sign something that you're not sure what you signed. But generally, in that case, you do not specifically admit fault. You just kind of try to describe what happens, and then the two insurance companies figure out, this one's going to pay or that one's going to pay, or they're going to split it 50-50 or some other split.
Yeah.
And it usually works out really well, because it means that small accidents don't back up traffic waiting for cops and things like that, and you just kind of sign the thing and move on your way. If there is some problem where you can't drive anymore, and you've had some kind of breakdown, whether it was from an accident or just some kind of, ran out of gas or some mechanical problem, you will find in the car that the rental agency will have provided kind of a red and orange emergency triangle, which, so pull off the car as far as you can from the road. And especially if, you're around a curve or something, if people are going to have a hard time seeing you, but you're supposed to take the triangle about 30 meters behind the car so that people will see it, set that up. And there's a bright yellow or green vest that you're supposed to wear. And then, especially if you're on the freeway, you want to get you and anyone else in the car on the other side of the
rail, the security rail.
The security rail.
Never cross a freeway, obviously.
No, never. And then nearby, there should be every couple of kilometers, there's a big orange post with an emergency phone in it.
Yep. Those sometimes don't work anymore.
So you can also call 112 on a cell phone or
any cell phone.
And so 112 is the emergency number, and also there are these orange posts.
Yep.
So I've talked a lot. I hope I haven't scared everybody out of driving.
You've been very thorough, I have to say. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a lot of stuff.
But the point of this was not to talk people out of trying it, just to give you a few ideas that would hopefully give you some confidence, and so that if you ever got honked at or something, you'd kind of know why, instead of thinking all these people are just random and crazy. But just take a lot of deep breaths, keep an eye out, don't go too fast. Know that any mistake you make, probably a local makes, in some scenario, because it is a little complicated. It's not a big deal. But because things are kind of chaotic as far as the way the roads work and stuff, the other drivers are watching out for surprises pretty well too. They really don't zone out too badly because you can't. And even if you make some mistake, you'll get some little illegal honk and, at you, and big deal. And so, and if you do miss a turn, or if you do get a little bit lost, don't worry, drive around the block, wait for the next roundabout, you'll get there eventually with a good GPS.
Yeah. Okay, well, you have told us a lot of things. I think this episode is going to be probably one of the longest we've ever done, but that's okay. We've decided that we're not going to worry about the length of the episodes anymore. We'll just do whatever makes sense. So I just want to remind everybody that we would love it if you would go to joinusinfrance.com/16. This is episode 16. And to the very bottom of the page, you will see share buttons. Share this episode. I'm sure you know people who are going to be driving in France very soon. And send us any other questions while you're at the website. Post your questions in the comments and we will respond. So thank you very much, everybody, and happy driving in France.
Happy driving.
Au revoir.
Bye.